Have you ever felt like you're giving everything to others, yet no one really notices or cares? Why do we sometimes feel alone in a crowd, even though people surround us? Is there a deeper reason behind these feelings, or are we simply overthinking things? Imagine this. You've spent the whole day helping a friend, sending messages, supporting them through tough times. But when you need support, no one seems to be there. Does this scenario sound familiar? It's the truth we often face in life. No one truly cares about you the way you hope. But what does this really mean? Is this a cruel fact of life, or is it something deeper that can lead to personal growth? Welcome to Wisdom Woven. Today, we're diving into one of the toughest truths we all need to understand. No one cares about you. But before you dismiss this as a negative idea, stick with us. In this video, we'll explore how embracing this concept can bring true freedom and transformation to your life. We'll be discussing the wisdom from Buddhism and how it offers powerful insights that can change the way you look at your relationships, emotions, and life in general. There are so many views on this channel, but only 0.2% of people subscribe. So, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel to stay connected with more insightful content like this. Don't miss out. Now, let's start this journey of understanding what it really means when we say, no one cares about you. The illusion of self-centeredness. Have you ever thought about why you feel hurt when others don't acknowledge your efforts or emotions? Why does it seem like, no matter how hard we try, it's never enough? The root of this pain often lies in a misunderstanding of ourselves and others. We live in a world that revolves around me. We are constantly told to focus on our desires, our needs, our happiness. Society pushes us to be successful, to have people around us who love and care for us, and to constantly seek validation from the world outside. From a young age, we are conditioned to believe that we are the center of everything, that our needs must come first, and that the world should revolve around our happiness. But what if this is an illusion? What if this self-centered view is actually causing us more suffering than we realize? The truth is that the idea of me is not as solid as we think. In Buddhism, this concept is known as anatta, or the non-self. Anatta teaches us that there is no permanent, unchanging self. What we think of as me is simply a collection of experiences, thoughts, and emotions that are constantly changing. This illusion of a fixed, solid self creates expectations that others should treat us in a certain way, should care for us in specific ways, and should validate our existence. Imagine for a moment that there is no permanent you, no constant self that remains unchanged throughout time. When you let go of this idea, the way you interact with others and the world changes. You no longer demand that people act a certain way to fulfill your needs, because you realize that both you and others are constantly evolving. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't care about yourself. In fact, understanding the non-self can help you care for yourself more genuinely because it encourages you to let go of unrealistic expectations and external validation. When you free yourself from the constant need for approval, you begin to live more authentically, without fear of judgment or rejection. You can still love and care for others deeply, but you won't be trapped in the expectation that they must return the same level of care. In everyday life, we tend to prioritize our feelings and desires, believing they should come first. This leads to constant frustration when others don't meet our expectations. Take, for example, a situation where you've been kind to someone, but they don't seem to appreciate it or reciprocate. You might feel hurt, thinking, I gave so much, but they didn't even acknowledge it. However, this expectation is rooted in the belief that your self-worth depends on others' actions. When we hold on to the belief that we are the center of the world, we create a cycle of attachment. We become attached to how others perceive us and how we want them to act toward us. But this attachment can lead to suffering because people can't always meet our expectations, and life is constantly changing. People come and go, their feelings change, and circumstances shift. So, when we expect others to stay exactly as we want them to, we set ourselves up for disappointment. Buddhism offers us a way to break free from this cycle of attachment. By practicing mindfulness and awareness, we begin to see that our sense of self is not as fixed as we think. We become more attuned to the present moment, without the heavy burden of expectations. This doesn't mean we stop caring about others or ourselves. It means we let go of the need to control how others treat us. Let's look at another example. Think about your relationship with a close friend or family member. You might find yourself getting upset when they don't behave the way you expect them to. Perhaps you've helped them during difficult times. But when you're going through a tough situation, they don't seem to offer the same support. In this moment, you may feel disappointed, angry, or frustrated. But why do you feel this way? Is it because of their actions, or is it because you are attached to the idea of how they should act? When we let go of the attachment to a specific outcome, we begin to see people for who they truly are, not who we want them to be. This doesn't mean we stop caring about them or loving them, but rather, we learn to appreciate their actions without the need for them to be perfect or always aligned with our expectations. This is the freedom that comes from understanding the illusion of self-centeredness. In Buddhist practice, this understanding leads to a reduction in suffering. When we no longer believe that the world revolves around us, we begin to experience life with greater clarity and peace. We let go of the stress and anxiety that come from trying to control others in the outcome of every situation. Instead, we learn to embrace the flow of life, knowing that people and circumstances are constantly changing, and that's okay. A key part of this understanding is recognizing that the idea of a permanent, unchanging self is just a mental construct. Our mind creates stories about who we are and how we relate to the world, but these stories are not reality. They are just fleeting thoughts and feelings that pass through our consciousness. When we identify with these thoughts, we begin to believe that our identity is fixed and that we must protect it at all costs. This can lead to defensiveness, anger, and frustration when things don't go as we expect. By practicing mindfulness and meditation, we can learn to observe our thoughts without attaching to them. We can begin to see that our thoughts about ourselves are not who we truly are. This realization allows us to stop fighting against reality and start accepting it as it is. We no longer need to cling to the illusion of a fixed self, and in doing so, we free ourselves from the suffering that comes with it. Buddhism teaches that when we let go of this attachment to self, we cultivate a sense of peace and compassion. We can love others without expecting anything in return. We can act with kindness and generosity, not because we want something in exchange, but because it brings us joy and peace. This shift in mindset allows us to live more freely, without the constant need for validation or approval from others. As we explore the teachings of Buddhism further, we will dive deeper into how letting go of this self-centered view can help us find true happiness and inner peace. But for now, take a moment to reflect on your own life. Are you holding on to expectations about how others should treat you? Are you creating unnecessary suffering by attaching to the idea of who you should be? The more we let go of these attachments, the more we open ourselves to the freedom and peace that comes with understanding our true nature. Understanding Buddhist philosophy, the concept of anatta. In the world we live in, we are often told that we are unique, that we are important, and that the world revolves around us. Society places great emphasis on our identity, who we are, what we do, and how we appear to others. But in Buddhism, there is a concept that challenges this idea at its core. Anatta, the doctrine of no self. It teaches that the sense of self, the idea of an unchanging I, is an illusion. But how can this be? How can we live in a world where we are constantly taught that our identity is so important, only to find out that it doesn't really exist? To understand this, let's first think about the idea of a river. Imagine standing by a river, watching the water flow. You can see the current, the ripples, and the waves, but can you ever point to the same water twice? The water is constantly changing, moving, and flowing. In the same way, our sense of self is not static. It's in constant flux. What we think of as I, or me, is not a fixed entity, but a collection of changing thoughts, emotions, and experiences. Buddhism tells us that there is no permanent, unchanging self at the core of our being. The concept of self is something we create through our attachment to our body, our thoughts, and our experiences. This attachment causes suffering. We become so wrapped up in the idea of who we are and what we want that we forget the truth. There is no permanent I to hold on to. The first step toward understanding this concept is to realize that the mind is like a mirror. A mirror reflects everything that comes before it, objects, faces, and lights, but it does not keep any of it. Once an object moves away, it is no longer reflected. Similarly, Our mind reflects experiences, but it doesn't store them permanently. The moment we let go of the idea of self, we begin to see the world for what it truly is, a constantly changing flow of experiences. This is not to say that we do not exist, but rather that our existence is not separate from everything else. The idea of a fixed, individual self is a mental construct. We experience life as individuals, but this individuality is only temporary. It is a collection of elements, our body, our thoughts, our emotions, that are always changing. When we cling to the idea of a permanent self, we suffer because we are holding on to something that is not real. Buddhism teaches that once we accept that the self is an illusion, we can begin to let go of the attachments that cause our suffering. Our desire to maintain control over our identity, to keep things the way we think they should be, leads to frustration and unhappiness. But when we understand that there is no fixed self, we begin to loosen our grip on these desires and attachments. We start to find peace in the present moment, free from the need to define ourselves. Anatta also helps us understand why we suffer from desires. We want things, experiences, and recognition because we think they will fulfill us or make us feel like we are something. But in reality, these desires are rooted in the belief that we are incomplete, that we are missing something. The Buddha taught that this belief is an illusion. True happiness comes from letting go of this craving and realizing that we are not missing anything. We are whole, even without external things or validation. In this sense, the concept of anatta is liberating. It frees us from the endless cycle of desire, attachment, and disappointment. Once we understand that our sense of self is not permanent, we begin to find freedom in the present moment. We stop clinging to things, ideas, and people, because we understand that nothing in life is permanent. This is not to say that we should stop caring about others or detach ourselves completely from the world. Rather, it means that we can engage with life more fully without being bound by the constant need for affirmation or approval. When we let go of the need to define ourselves, we become more fluid and adaptable. We no longer feel the pressure to meet the expectations of others or to maintain a certain image of who we are. We can embrace change without fear because we understand that change is a natural part of life. Just as a river flows, we too can flow with life, letting go of the need to control every aspect of it. This understanding is not something that comes overnight. It is a gradual process that takes time and practice. In Buddhism, the path to enlightenment is often described as a journey of self-discovery and letting go. The more we practice mindfulness, the more we become aware of the transient nature of our thoughts and emotions. We start to see that the things we once thought defined us, our job, our relationships, our image, are not the essence of who we are. They are temporary roles that we play in the grand play of life. Through meditation and mindfulness, we begin to experience the truth of anatta. We start to notice how our thoughts and feelings rise and fall, just like the waves in the ocean. They come, they go, and they leave no lasting mark. When we stop identifying with them, we stop suffering. We become more at peace with ourselves because we understand that there is no permanent self to protect. We can simply be. The concept of anatta also encourages us to see ourselves as part of a greater whole. We are not isolated beings. We are interconnected with all things. Just as the river is connected to the ocean, we are connected to all other beings and elements of the world. When we recognize this, we stop feeling alone or separate. We begin to see that our true nature is not an isolated self, but a part of the vast, interconnected web of life. This realization leads us to compassion. When we understand that everyone, just like us, is experiencing the illusion of self, we begin to treat others with kindness and understanding. We no longer judge others based on their appearance, status, or achievements because we know that their sense of self is just as fleeting as ours. We begin to see beyond the surface and connect with people on a deeper, more compassionate level. Anatta also teaches us the value of letting go. It shows us that our attachments to things, people, and ideas are the source of our suffering. The more we cling to the idea of a fixed self, the more we suffer when things change. But when we embrace the truth of anatta, we free ourselves from these attachments. We can let go of the need to control and just be. In this freedom, we find peace. In the end, the concept of anatta is about liberation. It is about letting go of the illusion of a permanent self and embracing the truth that we are constantly changing, evolving, and interconnected with all things. This understanding is the key to inner peace and true freedom. When we stop clinging to the idea of who we think we are, we open ourselves to the beauty and flow of life. The nature of suffering and detachment. Life is full of ups and downs. One moment you might be soaring, feeling on top of the world. In the next, you're hit by a wave of disappointment or sadness. This constant fluctuation is what the Buddha called dukkha, often translated as suffering. But suffering, as we know it, isn't just about physical pain. It's about how we experience life, how we respond to changes, loss, and the unpredictable nature of the world around us. Why does suffering exist? Isn't it unfair to endure so much pain in life? These are questions that often arise when we confront suffering. We want comfort, happiness, and peace, but life doesn't always give us what we expect. The Buddha, however, teaches us that suffering is a part of life, and it arises from our attachment to things as they are. We get attached to people, situations, outcomes, and even our own identity. When these things change or slip away, suffering arises. Think about a time in your life when something important to you was lost, perhaps a relationship, a job, or even your sense of self. How did it feel? If you were deeply attached to it, the loss may have felt like a hole in your life, leaving you empty or broken. But the deeper truth is that attachment to these things creates suffering in the first place. The Buddha taught us that clinging to things, expecting them to always stay the same, is the root of much of our pain. Suffering also comes from our expectations. We often think life should go a certain way. We expect people to treat us kindly, for things to work out, for circumstances to align with our desires. When things don't go as planned, frustration sets in. But this expectation, this desire for things to be a particular way, sets us up for disappointment. If you understand that everything is temporary and that life is constantly changing, you start to see suffering not as something to avoid but as a natural part of existence. Detachment is key in breaking free from this cycle of suffering. But don't confuse detachment with indifference. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring about people or things. It simply means that you let go of the need for things to be a certain way in order for you to feel happy. You can still love, still care, still engage with life, but you do it with an understanding that everything is impermanent. Relationships, successes, failures, even your own thoughts and emotions, they all come and go. When you detach from the need to control or hold on to them, you free yourself from the suffering that comes when things inevitably change. Buddhism teaches that true peace comes from learning to let go. When we release our tight grip on the things we think we need to be happy, we create space for a deeper, more lasting form of happiness. This is not a happiness based on external circumstances, but a happiness that comes from within. It's the peace of knowing that, no matter what happens, you are whole and complete as you are. Let's consider a simple example. Imagine you are holding a cup of hot coffee. If you hold onto the cup too tightly, it's going to burn your hand. But if you relax your grip, the heat becomes tolerable, and you can enjoy your drink. This is similar to life. The more tightly we hold on to our attachments, the more painful life becomes. But when we learn to loosen our grip, life flows more easily. We can experience joy, love, and connection without the intense pain that comes from expecting things to stay the same. Detachment also allows us to face challenges with a clearer mind. Think about the last time you faced a difficult situation. Did you feel overwhelmed by your emotions or thoughts about it? Maybe you thought, "This is unfair," or "I don't deserve this." But these thoughts are a reflection of attachment. They come from the desire to control things, to have them turn out exactly how we want. When we detach, we can look at the situation objectively, without the distortion of our desires. We can then respond to it with clarity and wisdom, instead of reacting out of fear or frustration. In Buddhism, there's a practice called vipassana, or insight meditation. This practice helps us see things as they truly are, without the filters of our desires and attachments. By sitting in silence, observing our thoughts, and letting go of our reactions, we begin to see the impermanent nature of everything. We realize that all thoughts, emotions, and experiences arise and pass away. They are not permanent, and they do not define us. The more we practice detachment, the less we become affected by the ups and downs of life. We stop identifying with the labels we put on ourselves, whether we are successful, loved, or respected. Instead, we start to see ourselves as part of the flow of life. We are not separate from the world. We are part of it. Everything is interconnected, and everything is constantly changing. This understanding doesn't make life any less rich or meaningful. In fact, it can make life even more meaningful because you're no longer holding on to expectations of how things should be. You're embracing life as it is, with all its messiness and beauty. You can love without fear, work without attachment to outcomes, and live without the constant stress of needing things to be a certain way. The key to detachment is understanding that the world doesn't owe you anything. People don't owe you anything. Success doesn't owe you anything. The only thing you can control is your own mind and how you respond to the world. When you accept that everything is impermanent, you free yourself from the burden of attachment and the suffering that comes with it. By practicing detachment, you find peace within yourself. You become less affected by the chaos of the world and more in tune with your true nature. And this is where real freedom lies. Not in having everything you want, but in letting go of the need to have things a certain way. When you do this, you open yourself up to a deeper, more lasting peace, one that is not dependent on the outside world. The Buddhist teachings on detachment are not about withdrawing from life, but about fully embracing it without clinging to it. It's about finding a balance, engaging with the world while understanding its impermanence. This is the path to true freedom, to living a life without the constant burden of attachment, and to experiencing the peace that comes from within. So, the next time you face suffering or challenge, ask yourself, what am I attached to here? What am I trying to hold on to that's causing me pain? When you can answer that question, you'll be on the path to freedom. Detach, let go, and experience life as it truly is. Liberation through letting go of external validation. As we continue our journey of self-awareness, we need to confront a reality that many of us resist: the need for external validation. It's a concept that governs so much of our lives. Whether it's a compliment from a friend, praise from a colleague, or approval from family. But the question is, do we truly need all of that to feel fulfilled? Buddhism teaches us that freedom and peace come from letting go of this constant craving for recognition from others. In daily life, we are often driven by the desire for approval. Whether it's on social media, at work, or even in our personal relationships, we continuously seek affirmation. We post pictures hoping for likes, we make decisions based on what others will think, and we mold ourselves to fit the expectations placed upon us. But what happens when we don't receive that validation? It's easy to feel lost, unimportant, or even worthless. Yet, this is exactly where Buddhism offers us its transformative wisdom. Buddhist teachings on anatta, the doctrine of no self, and anicca, impermanence, suggest that clinging to external validation is part of the cause of our suffering. When we depend on others to define our worth, we give up our power and allow external circumstances to control our inner peace. But here's the key. The need for external validation is not only unnecessary, it is also a trap that keeps us stuck in a cycle of seeking, receiving, and then needing more. Let's break this down in simple terms. Imagine you're a child, and you've just completed a drawing. You show it to your parents, and their reaction, whether praise or indifference, shapes how you feel about your work. Over time, you begin to rely on their approval to feel good about yourself. But when they don't respond as you hope, the joy of creating disappears. You feel disappointed, maybe even hurt, because your worth was tied to their reaction. This example shows how much we have been conditioned to seek validation outside ourselves. Now, think about the bigger picture. As adults, this pattern continues. Whether it's seeking validation in our jobs, relationships, or social circles, we find ourselves relying on others for approval. But here's the truth. No one else can define your worth except for you. External validation is fleeting. It changes, it's inconsistent, and it's often based on the perceptions and judgments of others. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. It slips away. Buddhism offers a liberating alternative. The path to freedom lies in the practice of self-acceptance and self-validation. This means learning to recognize your own worth without relying on others to tell you how valuable you are. The Buddha taught that true happiness comes from within. When we stop looking for validation from the outside world, we can finally cultivate peace in our hearts. Letting go of external validation doesn't mean becoming indifferent or dismissing the importance of relationships. Rather, it means that we stop allowing others' opinions to shape our emotional state. Imagine living a life where you are not swayed by whether people approve of you or not. Instead of seeking constant recognition, you focus on doing what feels right for you. You learn to love and appreciate yourself, and you become content with who you are, independent of external praise or criticism. This shift is powerful. It requires a deep understanding that true happiness comes not from pleasing others or receiving their approval, but from aligning with your own inner values. Buddhism teaches that when we release our attachment to the opinions of others, we can experience true liberation. The Buddhist practice of mindfulness and meditation helps us become aware of this attachment, and through consistent practice, we can release it. You might be wondering, but how do I stop seeking validation? It's not an overnight process. It starts with awareness. Pay attention to the moments when you seek approval. When you feel insecure or uncertain, ask yourself why you are looking for someone else to fill that void. Reflect on how you can affirm yourself instead. The more you practice self-compassion and self-acceptance, the less you will rely on external sources to validate your existence. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a concept called equanimity. This means being at peace with whatever happens, regardless of external circumstances. When we can cultivate equanimity, we stop reacting emotionally to the approval or disapproval of others. We begin to see that our worth is intrinsic, not based on what anyone else thinks. We can still be kind, loving, and supportive to others, but we no longer need their praise or recognition to feel whole. To truly embrace this, we must also understand impermanence. Everything changes: people's opinions, trends, circumstances, even our own thoughts and feelings. Nothing lasts forever, and that includes the praise or criticism we receive from others. When we understand impermanence, we realize that attaching our self-worth to anything that is temporary will only lead to suffering. The beauty of Buddhism lies in its simplicity. It does not tell us to reject the world or abandon our relationships. Instead, it encourages us to stop relying on external factors to define who we are. By practicing mindfulness, meditation, and self-reflection, we begin to realize that we are already complete. We do not need anyone else's validation to feel valuable. One of the most empowering aspects of this teaching is that it gives us the freedom to be authentic. When we stop seeking validation, we can start living in a way that feels true to ourselves without worrying about how others will perceive us. Imagine the freedom in that. It allows us to make choices based on our values and desires, rather than on the need to please or impress others. This is where true liberation begins. It's not about shutting others out or rejecting the importance of relationships. It's about understanding that you don't need anyone's approval to be happy. You can live a life that is authentic, fulfilling, and peaceful, regardless of what others think or say. By letting go of the need for external validation, we step into a more empowered, centered version of ourselves. We become free to live in alignment with our true nature. It's a journey worth taking, and the rewards are immeasurable. You'll begin to feel lighter, more at peace, and more content with who you are. It's a path to lasting happiness, one that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. So, let go of the need for validation. Embrace the truth that your worth is not defined by others. Find your peace within, and you'll discover a life that is truly your own. This freedom, this liberation, is what Buddhism offers us. It's the key to unlocking a life filled with inner peace and happiness. The role of compassion, caring without expectation. Let's take a moment to reflect on a powerful concept in Buddhism: compassion. It is not just about feeling pity or sorrow for others. True compassion transcends those feelings. Compassion is an active force, a choice to care, to act in kindness, but with no expectation of receiving anything in return. This is one of the greatest teachings of Buddhism: caring for others without seeking validation, recognition, or rewards. In today's world, we often find ourselves in relationships and situations where we give, and give, hoping that we will receive something in return. We may even go as far as to expect others to care for us the same way we care for them. But what happens when we don't get that? It can lead to disappointment, bitterness, and even resentment. We feel let down, as if we are not being appreciated. However, Buddhism teaches us that this expectation is the root of our suffering. When we expect others to care for us the same way we care for them, we are essentially giving out of a sense of need for attention, validation, or love. This is not true compassion. It is a form of attachment, and attachment leads to suffering. The Buddha taught that attachment to others, to outcomes, to recognition. All of this causes pain. But what if we could change that perspective? Imagine if you could care for others without expecting anything in return. What if your acts of kindness weren't about what you could get, but rather about simply giving? That's the transformative power of compassion. The beauty of this teaching is that when you truly care without expectation, you free yourself from disappointment and resentment. You create a sense of inner peace because you're no longer tied to the outcome of your actions. This doesn't mean you stop caring about others or that you become indifferent to their needs. On the contrary, it means you learn to care deeply, but without the heavy burden of expecting something back. It's about giving freely, without strings attached. When you act out of genuine compassion, the benefits ripple through your life in ways you might not immediately see, but they are always present. True compassion arises from understanding. It's about realizing that everyone is struggling in their own way. Everyone is dealing with their own battles, their own suffering. When we recognize this, it becomes easier to care for others without expecting anything in return. We stop viewing people as sources of validation and instead see them as fellow travelers on this difficult journey of life. And in doing so, we open our hearts and minds to deeper connections and more meaningful relationships. Buddhism teaches that by caring without expectation, we are not only helping others, but also helping ourselves. We are cultivating an inner peace that is unshaken by the ups and downs of external circumstances. When we stop tying our happiness to the actions or feelings of others, we begin to experience a deep sense of freedom. We are no longer waiting for others to give us what we think we deserve. Instead, we find satisfaction and fulfillment within ourselves. This idea of compassion without expectation is liberating. It's liberating because it shifts our focus from what we want from others to what we can offer them. It's no longer about how others treat us, but about how we choose to treat others, regardless of how they respond. In doing so, we break free from the cycle of attachment and expectation, and we begin to live a life of true peace. If you think about it, some of the most fulfilling experiences in life happen when we help others without asking for anything in return. It could be as simple as holding the door open for someone, or listening to a friend who needs support. These small, selfless acts of compassion can have a profound impact, not only on the person you're helping but also on your own well-being. You start to realize that the act of giving itself is where the joy lies, not in receiving anything in return. In Buddhism, there's a term called metta, which refers to loving kindness, the unconditional love we extend to all beings. This love is not based on attachment or expectation. It's a love that is freely given, a love that exists without conditions. When we practice metta, we are cultivating a heart that can love without boundaries. We are embracing the idea that every living being deserves compassion, regardless of who they are or what they have done. However, practicing compassion without expectation is not always easy. It requires us to let go of our attachment to outcomes and to develop a deep sense of patience and understanding. It requires us to see others not as obstacles in our lives, but as beings who deserve our care and attention. This takes practice, and it takes time. But as you begin to practice, you'll notice a shift. The more you care for others without expecting anything back, the more you will feel at peace with yourself. You will no longer be waiting for others to validate your worth. You will no longer be dependent on their actions to feel loved or appreciated. Instead, you'll find a deeper, more profound sense of joy in simply offering your love and care freely. In the process of learning to care without expectation, you also learn to detach from the need for others to recognize your efforts. You stop looking for praise or acknowledgement because the act of caring itself is enough. This is the freedom that Buddhism speaks of, freedom from the constant need for approval, from the pain of unmet expectations. The Buddhist teachings on compassion guide us toward a life of deeper connection and understanding. They teach us that true happiness comes not from what we can get from others, but from what we can give. And in giving, we find that we are more connected than we ever imagined. When we stop expecting, we open ourselves to receive the most beautiful thing of all, the peace that comes from selfless love. So, the next time you help someone or show compassion, ask yourself, am I doing this because I expect something in return, or because I genuinely want to help? If the answer is the latter, then you are on the path to true freedom, a freedom that comes from caring without expectation. And in this freedom, you will find a deep sense of fulfillment, a peace that cannot be shaken by the actions of others. By adopting this mindset, you will notice a change in your relationships, your emotional state, and your general outlook on life. You will start to see people not as sources of validation, but as human beings who deserve kindness, just like you. This is the true power of compassion, a power that transforms not just others, but yourself as well. So let us walk this path together, embracing the practice of compassion without expectation, and let it guide us toward a life of deeper peace, connection, and fulfillment. Impermanence, accepting change in life and relationships. Life is full of change. Every day, something new happens. People come into our lives and then leave. Things we once valued may fade into the background, replaced by new things, new experiences, or new people. This constant state of change can be overwhelming, but it's also a fundamental part of our existence. In Buddhism, this concept is called anicca, which translates to impermanence. Everything in this world is in a state of constant flux, and this includes us. Why is impermanence so difficult to accept? Because as humans, we crave stability. We want to hold on to the good moments, to the people we love, to the things that make us feel safe and happy. But the truth is, nothing lasts forever. The people who are closest to us will one day leave. The jobs we have may change, and even our own physical bodies will change. This can be scary and unsettling, but understanding impermanence can actually free us from the fear of change. When we resist change, we set ourselves up for suffering. We try to hold on to things, people, and feelings that are constantly slipping through our fingers. We build expectations around our lives, hoping that certain things will stay the same forever. And when they don't, we feel pain. This attachment to permanence causes us to struggle against the natural flow of life. But what if, instead of resisting, we could embrace change? What if we could view life's impermanence not as a source of fear, but as a path to growth? In Buddhism, we are encouraged to acknowledge that all things are temporary. Our pain, our happiness, our successes, our failures, none of these things are permanent. This doesn't mean we should not care about what's happening right now. It simply means that we should not cling to the idea that the present moment will last forever. Take a moment and think about a relationship in your life. Perhaps it's a friendship or a romantic relationship. In the beginning, everything was perfect. The connection felt unbreakable, and you thought it would last forever. But over time, things started to change. The spark faded. Communication became strained. And eventually, the relationship ended. If you've been through something like this, you may have felt heartbroken, confused, or betrayed. But if we look deeper, we can see that this is just the natural course of things. The relationship was never meant to last forever. It served its purpose, and now it's time to let go. Now, think about a moment of joy in your life. Perhaps it was a celebration, a beautiful experience, or a moment of achievement. You felt on top of the world. But even that moment passed. It didn't last forever, and that's okay. Impermanence means that we don't have to hold on to those perfect moments. Instead, we can appreciate them for what they were and let them go, knowing that life will bring new moments, new opportunities, and new experiences. This doesn't mean we stop caring about people or stop investing in relationships. It simply means that we stop expecting everything to stay the same. We can still love deeply, work hard, and enjoy the moments we have, but we do so with the understanding that change is inevitable. This understanding helps us appreciate life more fully because we know that every moment, whether good or bad, is precious because it is temporary. In Buddhism, impermanence is not seen as a negative thing. In fact, it's one of the three marks of existence, along with suffering, dukkha, and non-self, anatta. These three ideas are the foundation of Buddhist teachings, and they help us see the world as it really is. When we accept that everything is temporary, we become less attached to outcomes and more at peace with what comes our way. We stop trying to control everything, and instead, we learn to flow with life as it unfolds. The concept of impermanence also teaches us to cherish the present moment. When we realize that life is constantly changing, we become more mindful of the time we have. We don't waste our moments waiting for something to happen or trying to make things stay the same. Instead, we focus on what's happening right now, whether it's a conversation with a friend, a beautiful sunset, or a quiet moment of reflection. We learn to savor the present because we know that it won't last forever. This acceptance of impermanence can also help us deal with loss. When we lose someone or something important to us, the pain can feel overwhelming. But if we remember that everything is temporary, we can begin to heal. We can understand that the pain we feel is just another moment in the cycle of life. And even though it hurts, it too will pass. By accepting impermanence, we can learn to let go and move forward with grace. In relationships, understanding impermanence helps us build healthier connections. We stop expecting our friends or loved ones to be perfect or to always be there for us in the way we want them to. We stop holding on to unrealistic expectations and instead appreciate the person for who they are in the present moment. We let go of the idea that people should never change, and instead, we allow them to grow and evolve. This can bring peace to our relationships because we no longer need them to be something they're not. Impermanence also encourages us to take better care of ourselves. We often forget that our bodies are temporary, too. We think we're invincible, that we have all the time in the world. But the reality is that our bodies, like everything else, will change. We grow older, we get sick, and we experience loss in our physical selves. But instead of fearing these changes, we can embrace them. By accepting the impermanence of our bodies, we become more mindful of how we treat them. We make healthier choices, cherish our vitality while we have it, and prepare ourselves to face the natural changes that come with age. When we truly understand impermanence, we stop seeing life as something to control or hold on to. We see it as something to experience. We stop being afraid of change, and instead, we become excited for what comes next. The key is to live with awareness, to appreciate each moment, and to let go of the need for things to stay the same. In doing so, we open ourselves up to a deeper, more fulfilling life. Life is a journey, and just like any journey, it's full of twists and turns. There will be highs and lows, moments of joy and moments of sorrow. But if we can embrace impermanence, we can find peace in every part of the journey. Because the one thing that will always remain constant is change itself. And when we learn to flow with it, we find the freedom to live fully, without fear or attachment. Mindfulness and inner awareness, finding strength within. In our busy, fast-paced world, it's easy to get caught up in the noise around us. We constantly worry about what others think, what we need to do next, and how we can meet expectations. But amidst all this, there's something we often overlook: the power of being present. It's called mindfulness. Mindfulness is more than just a buzzword. It's a way of being, a way of living with intention and awareness in every moment. It's about being fully present with what's happening right now, without judgment or distraction. In a world that demands so much of our attention, mindfulness is a sanctuary, a way to find inner peace and clarity. And when we cultivate mindfulness, we begin to tap into a strength that doesn't rely on external validation or circumstances. This inner awareness is something we all have within us, but often we don't know how to access it. When we're mindful, we stop being prisoners of our thoughts. We stop letting our minds control us. Instead, we become the observers of our thoughts, feelings, and sensations. We can begin to separate ourselves from the constant stream of mental chatter that often leaves us feeling overwhelmed, anxious, and disconnected. Let me explain this with a simple example. Picture yourself sitting on a bench in a park. People are walking by, the wind is blowing, birds are chirping. Your mind might start racing with thoughts. I need to go to the grocery store. What should I have for dinner? I haven't called my friend in days. But instead of following those thoughts, you simply observe them. You notice how they come and go, like clouds passing in the sky. By doing this, you create space between yourself and the constant noise of your thoughts. And in that space, you can find peace. Mindfulness isn't about escaping from life. It's about engaging with life fully. It's about learning how to be with yourself, without distractions, without rushing to the next thing. In Buddhist teachings, mindfulness is often described as the art of right attention. It's the practice of paying attention to what's happening, right here, right now, with an open heart and mind. When we practice mindfulness, we become more aware of our emotions, our reactions, and our patterns. We start to notice when we're acting out of habit or reacting automatically to situations, and we can choose to respond differently. It's a shift from living on autopilot to living with intention. This is where true strength lies. It's not in being able to control everything around us or in constantly achieving more. It's in being able to stay calm and centered, no matter what life throws our way. Mindfulness teaches us to be resilient, to face challenges without being overwhelmed by them. It gives us the strength to accept things as they are, without clinging to them or pushing them away. When we stop resisting life, we begin to flow with it. One of the key teachings of Buddhism is the idea of non-attachment. This doesn't mean we stop caring about things. It means we stop being controlled by them. We learn to let go of the need to control outcomes and to simply be with what is. Mindfulness helps us cultivate this non-attachment, allowing us to enjoy life fully without being dependent on external circumstances for our happiness. In everyday life, mindfulness can take many forms. It can be as simple as taking a few deep breaths when you're feeling stressed. It can be as profound as sitting in quiet meditation, observing the thoughts that arise and letting them go without judgment. The more we practice mindfulness, the more we begin to see how much power we have over our own peace of mind. It's not something outside of us that we need to search for. It's something within us that we can access at any moment. So, how do we begin? The first step is to slow down. We live in a world that's always rushing, always moving to the next thing. But true strength comes from being able to pause, to take a breath, and to ground ourselves in the present moment. The next time you feel overwhelmed or distracted, take a moment to stop. Close your eyes for a second, take a deep breath, and notice what's happening right now. Can you hear the sound of your breath? Can you feel the weight of your body on the ground? Can you notice the space around you? This is mindfulness. Another way to practice mindfulness is through mindful walking. When you're walking somewhere, instead of letting your mind wander, focus on each step. Feel your feet touching the ground, the sensation of movement, the air around you. This simple act of paying attention can bring you into the present moment and help calm the mind. Mindfulness is not just about formal meditation or exercises. It's about bringing awareness into every part of our day. Whether you're eating, talking to someone, or washing the dishes, you can practice mindfulness by paying full attention to the task at hand. In these moments, you're not thinking about what happened yesterday or what's coming tomorrow. You're simply experiencing life as it is, in its purest form. It's also important to recognize that mindfulness is a skill that takes time to develop. It's not something you can master overnight. Just like learning to ride a bike, it takes practice and patience. Some days will be easier than others, but the key is to keep coming back to the present moment again and again. Through mindfulness, we begin to understand that our true source of strength doesn't lie in external circumstances. It doesn't lie in how much money we have, how many friends we have, or how successful we are. True strength lies within us, in our ability to be present, to accept what is, and to respond with clarity and wisdom. This inner awareness becomes a foundation that we can rely on, no matter what life throws our way. In conclusion, mindfulness is the practice of tuning into the present moment with full awareness and attention. It's about cultivating inner peace and strength by letting go of distractions, judgments, and the constant need to control. When we embrace mindfulness, we tap into a power that is always available to us. And as we continue to practice, we become more resilient, more grounded, and more at peace with ourselves and the world around us. Achieving emotional resilience through spiritual wisdom. In life, we all face challenges, stressful moments, heartbreaks, disappointments, and sometimes complete emotional exhaustion. It often feels like the world is weighing down on us, and we struggle to find a way out. The emotional turbulence can make us question our ability to move forward. But what if I told you that emotional resilience is not about avoiding pain, but learning how to navigate it with grace? Emotional resilience is the ability to bounce back from life's hardships, but it's not just about getting over it and moving on. It's about understanding the deeper nature of your emotions and how they affect you. It's about acknowledging that emotions are natural and that it's okay to feel sadness, anger, or frustration. However, the key lies in how you respond to these emotions and how you allow them to shape your future. The teachings of Buddhism offer invaluable wisdom in this regard. Buddhism doesn't tell us to suppress or ignore our feelings. Instead, it teaches us to understand them deeply and respond with awareness. It's through this awareness that emotional resilience begins to blossom. To start with, we need to understand the nature of our emotions. Emotions are like waves. They rise, they peak, and they eventually fall. But sometimes, we get caught up in the wave. We allow ourselves to be swept away, thinking that the wave will last forever. In those moments, we forget that emotions are temporary. They come and go, but our attachment to them can cause unnecessary suffering. In Buddhism, we learn that attachment is one of the main sources of suffering. When we get attached to our emotions, whether it's anger, fear, or even happiness, we are essentially holding on to something that is fleeting. Imagine holding on to a wave, expecting it to stay with you forever. It's impossible. The wave will crash and disappear, just as emotions do. This realization is the first step towards emotional resilience, understanding that all emotions are impermanent. When we accept the transient nature of our feelings, we stop clinging to them. This doesn't mean we stop feeling them. It means we stop letting them control us. One of the core teachings of Buddhism that helps build emotional resilience is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of being present in the moment, fully aware of what is happening around you and within you. When you are mindful, you acknowledge your emotions without judgment. You don't label them as good or bad. You simply observe them as they arise and pass. Think about a time when you felt anger or frustration. What did it feel like in your body? Where did the tension build up? By practicing mindfulness, you can recognize the physical sensations associated with those emotions. This helps you to not only identify the emotion, but also create a space between you and the feeling itself. You are no longer the anger. You are the observer of anger. This small shift in perspective is incredibly powerful. By practicing mindfulness, you also create a space for emotional regulation. You don't act impulsively when negative emotions arise. Instead of reacting with anger or frustration, you pause, breathe, and choose how to respond. This moment of awareness gives you the power to make more conscious decisions, instead of letting your emotions dictate your actions. Another key teaching in Buddhism that builds emotional resilience is compassion. Compassion for yourself and others. We often think of compassion as something we extend to others, but it's just as important to show compassion to ourselves. When we are going through tough emotional times, we can be our harshest critics. We blame ourselves for feeling sad or angry. We think that we should always be strong and composed. But this is not the way of compassion. Compassion is about accepting ourselves in our most vulnerable moments. It's about understanding that we are human, and it's okay to feel broken or lost. In fact, those feelings are part of the human experience. When you show compassion to yourself, you give yourself permission to heal. You stop fighting against your emotions and start embracing them with kindness. This creates a nurturing space for emotional growth. Compassion also extends to others. When we are emotionally resilient, we can be more compassionate toward others who are struggling. We understand that everyone goes through challenges, and we learn not to judge them for their pain. Instead of offering solutions or advice, we simply listen and hold space for their suffering. This act of compassion not only helps others, but also strengthens our own emotional resilience. Another crucial concept in Buddhism is the idea of detachment, not in the sense of being indifferent or cold, but in the sense of letting go of the need to control everything. Many of our emotional struggles come from our desire to control our lives, our relationships, and even our emotions. We want things to go a certain way, and when they don't, we become upset. But true emotional resilience comes when we realize that we cannot control everything. Life is unpredictable, and the more we try to control it, the more we create suffering for ourselves. Detachment, in this context, means surrendering the need to control and instead embracing the flow of life. You accept that things will not always go the way you want, and that's okay. You trust that whatever happens will unfold as it should, even if it's not what you expected. Through detachment, you free yourself from unnecessary anxiety and stress. You stop trying to force outcomes and instead focus on responding to life with equanimity. This doesn't mean you don't care or stop trying. It means you stop clinging to specific outcomes and start finding peace in the process. One more important aspect of emotional resilience is acceptance. Acceptance is not about resigning yourself to a situation, but about acknowledging the reality of what is. It's about accepting things as they are without resistance. When you resist your emotions or the circumstances around you, you create more suffering. But when you accept what is, you release that resistance and create space for peace to enter. Acceptance also means accepting yourself as you are. So often, we resist our own imperfections, thinking we need to be something we're not in order to be happy. But when we accept ourselves, flaws, weaknesses, and all, we find peace. We realize that we are enough, just as we are. This acceptance is the foundation of emotional resilience. Building emotional resilience is a lifelong journey, and it requires patience, practice, and a deep understanding of yourself. But with the wisdom of Buddhism, you can learn to face life's challenges with grace and strength. You can become someone who is not controlled by your emotions, but instead responds to them with awareness, compassion, and equanimity. In the end, emotional resilience is about finding peace in the chaos. It's about learning to live with the inevitable ups and downs of life without being swept away by them. It's about standing firm, no matter what life throws your way. With the teachings of Buddhism, you can become the master of your emotions and live a life of true emotional freedom. Conclusion: your journey toward true freedom. So here we are, at the end of our journey. You've listened to everything we've shared, and now, it's time to reflect. Have you truly understood what it means when we say, "No one cares about you"? It's not a depressing idea. In fact, it's the gateway to your freedom. It's the key to unlocking a life of peace, acceptance, and joy. But to get there, we need to understand the truth clearly. And once we understand it, we can begin to live it. In the previous parts, we talked about how the world revolves around itself. Everyone is caught up in their own struggles, dreams, and challenges. They are all dealing with their own inner battles. And honestly, most people are so wrapped up in their own lives that they don't notice what you're doing, how you feel, or even what you need. They might not show care in the way you expect them to, but that's all right. Why? Because it's not their job to take care of your happiness or to be there for you at every step. That responsibility falls on you. The truth is that when you rely on others for your emotional well-being, you're giving away your power. You're waiting for something that is outside of your control. The good news is that you can take that power back. You can free yourself from the constant need for external validation. You can start living for yourself, finding joy within yourself, and embracing the love that already resides in your own heart. This doesn't mean you should shut out the people around you. No, it means that you should learn to be strong in your own self, so you can love and care for others without needing anything in return. Now, remember the Buddhist concept of anatta, the absence of a permanent, unchanging self. This idea teaches us that the self we so desperately cling to doesn't really exist. We often think that there's this me who needs others to care, who needs the world to revolve around them. But this self is just a collection of thoughts, emotions, and experiences. When we realize this, we can start to let go of the attachment to ourselves and stop expecting the world to meet our expectations. What's more, when we stop clinging to this idea of self, we stop suffering. We stop getting disappointed when people don't care about us the way we want. Instead, we start to understand that everything is transient, impermanent. This is another key teaching of Buddhism. Impermanence teaches us that nothing lasts forever. Our relationships, our emotions, even our own lives. Everything is in a constant state of change. So, if you are feeling lonely or upset because no one seems to care about you, remember this. The feelings will pass. The situation will change. And in time, you will find peace. This peace comes when we stop expecting others to fulfill us. You don't need someone else to complete your happiness. Your happiness is inside you already. It's just waiting for you to realize it. By practicing mindfulness, you can tap into this peace. When you stop chasing after the approval or attention of others, you begin to see the world more clearly. You stop reacting emotionally to things that once triggered you. You learn to be still, to be present, to be at peace with who you are, without needing anyone's approval. Imagine how your life would change if you lived with this freedom. What if you could go through your day, interacting with people, but never feeling like you needed their recognition or love? How different would your relationships be if you weren't depending on others to make you feel worthy or important? You'd still be kind, loving, and supportive. But now, you wouldn't be drained by the expectation that others should feel the same. Instead, you would be able to offer love freely, without strings attached. You would be at peace, no matter what others do or don't do. Let's talk about solitude for a moment. Many people fear being alone. They fear that if no one cares about them, they will be abandoned, left to suffer in isolation. But solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is the opportunity to connect with yourself. It's the space where you can listen to your thoughts, reflect on your life, and get to know your true nature. In Buddhism, solitude is seen as a chance to deepen your practice, to meditate, to look inward, and to find the truth within. Once you embrace solitude, you start to realize that you don't need others to make you feel whole. You already are whole. You are complete just as you are. And when you embrace this truth, something beautiful happens. You become free. Free from expectations. Free from disappointment. Free from the need for external validation. You stop seeking attention or approval from others. You begin to live your life with the fullness that comes from within. We've also explored the role of compassion. True compassion, in the Buddhist sense, is not about getting something in return. It's about caring for others without any expectations. It's about seeing the suffering of others and offering your support, not because you want them to return the favor, but because it's the right thing to do. When you understand that no one truly cares about you in the way you may hope, you can begin to let go of selfish desires and genuinely care for others without needing them to reciprocate. This is the beauty of selfless love. Finally, remember that the more we cling to the idea that others should care about us, the more we bind ourselves to suffering. When we accept that no one cares about us, we are not abandoning ourselves. In fact, we are freeing ourselves. We are giving ourselves the freedom to live fully, to love freely, and to be at peace. We are no longer chasing after something that we can never truly hold on to. Instead, we are embracing the truth that we are whole, complete, and enough, just as we are. This is your journey, the journey toward true freedom. It starts with understanding that the world doesn't owe you anything. People don't owe you anything. But you owe it to yourself to find your own peace, to love yourself, and to live your life with compassion and mindfulness. You have the power to choose how you live, how you feel, and how you respond to the world around you. And so, as we close, I want to remind you, no one cares about you, and that is the greatest gift you could ever receive, because it means you are free to be yourself, to live without fear, and to discover the happiness that comes from within. If you've gained something valuable from this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Woven. Stay connected, and continue your journey of self-discovery and freedom. Until next time, may you find peace within yourself and carry that peace into the world around you.